70% of the investors, at least in our local market, have kind of froze up and aren't buying. That means my lead list is 70% dead. I have to rebuild that and start building those relationships. At that time, we had just gone off on our own, established our own wholesaling business, rented office, spent a bunch of money, and subprime mortgages blew up, and then the market went like this. So how did we make it? Wholesaling kept us in the real estate business. Many of these big buyers do not leave the market. I'm a big buyer up in Seattle, Washington. We have been buying homes since 2006 all the way to today. We have never stopped. We are always buying. Thanks for tuning in to BiggerPockets. I am James Daynard, and today we are going to talk about how to pivot your wholesale business so you can grow in 2023. First, let's talk about what is wholesaling. Wholesaling is actually something that I've been doing since 2005. It's how I got in my real estate career. But what is it? So a wholesaler, what they do is they target off-market sellers or sellers in general, and they contract that property below what a buyer is willing to pay. Then they assign it to that buyer and they make the spread on the difference. So it's a great way to get into real estate investing with very little bit of money. So let's talk about how to pivot in 2023. So we've been actually wholesaling properties since 2005. That's how I got in the business. I worked for a local investment company. I was out banging doors and we were wholesaling deals 2005 to 2008, and actually we were having a ton of success. Everybody wanted to buy product just like we just saw. But then 2008 happened and the whole market fell apart. At that time, we had just gone off on our own, established our own wholesaling business, rented office, spent a bunch of money, as subprime mortgages blew up, and then the market went like this. So how did we make it? Wholesaling kept us in the real estate business. Most companies during that time could not figure out what to do. Investor demand dropped and people did not want to buy stuff. So what happened is we shifted from a seller's market to a buyer's market, and that affects the wholesaling community as well, right? As you're out contracting properties, if there's a low buyer demand, it's harder to wholesale those deals, but you can still do it. So we wholesaled hundreds of homes from 2008 and 2010, and we're about ready to talk about how we pivoted to stay in business and continue to crush it when it was a really challenging market. So as we enter a buyer's market, things are starting to change. For the past 2 years, it was actually really easy. It was easy and hard to wholesale properties. It was easy because there were so many buyers out there. We had hedge funds, fix and flip buyers, hard money was lending money at crazy rates. It made a lot of capital in the market with a high demand. So when you're wholesaling, that makes it a lot easier to move your deal. You put it under contract, there's no deals out there, people will pay you more. You could have actually contracted a lot slimmer deal or maybe even a bad deal, and someone bought it anyways. Where it was hard was working with the sellers. When you're in a seller's market, they don't want to give up their property for a good price. They're being firm on it. Their house is going up in value every month, so it's hard to get them to respond and get them in the queue and start talking to them. So how we pivoted our acquisitions is we're slowing the sale down. Buyers are no longer buying everything. They're being a lot more selective. So as we're targeting our acquisitions and working with these sellers, we are educating them on the current state of the market. Most of these sellers haven't even realized that the market has cooled down so much. They are just remembering what they saw 6 months ago. Again, that wasn't that long ago. But we've seen a massive shift where we've seen pricing come off about 30% from peak from 6 months ago. So this is our time to educate these sellers. We're sitting down with sellers and talking to them about the market. We're bringing news articles to explain what's going on in the housing market. We're showing them what the cost of money is and how much more in a mortgage calculator it takes to buy their house and live in it. By using this logic, it gets sellers to kind of realize that they might have missed the mark and they're not going to get that premium pricing. So when you're working on your acquisitions, don't just go for the sale. Slow it down. There is no hurry. Work with the sellers, educate them on the current state of the market, get their price of where they're at, and then start working them backwards. When we were working with this seller out of state on this property that we just wholesaled off, we had to bring in construction bids and show her the condition so she really wanted to wheel and deal the property. Until we actually showed her what was going on and what the actual cost to improve it would be, she wanted a much higher price. The second thing that we're pivoting on is how we're dispoing out properties. So what is disposition? That's how you sell that contract or property to the next buyer. So again, we have gone from a seller's market to a buyer's market. Before, when you're dispoing properties, a lot of wholesalers were tying them up under contract. They were just trying to get the biggest buyers list with as many emails that they could get on there, and then mass email marketed them. And with the demand being as high, a lot of times people would just snatch them. But as you go into a seller's market, that's harder to do. We've seen about 50 to 60, if not more, % of these investors leave the market. Hedge funds have slowed down. Inexperienced fix and flip operators are leaving the market. Burr buyers, short-term rental buyers are getting nervous. The financing doesn't quite mix. They're leaving the market. So to do wholesaling, you need to have a strong buyer group. The strong buyer group is not how many email addresses you can get or how many Facebook groups you can put it into. That's actually a good way to stale out your property and make it to where no one wants to buy it. You need to build the relationships. In 2008 and 9, when it was really hard to wholesale properties, we spent a ton of time with investors that were actively buying and really narrowing down their buy box. As wholesalers, the more that we understand what they want to buy and the margins that they want to buy on, it allows us to work it backwards and contract the deals for the right price. Many of these big buyers do not leave the market. I'm a big buyer up in Seattle, Washington. We have been buying homes since 2006 all the way to today. We have never stopped. We are always buying. Also, when you're doing your disposition, you got to think about the deal all the way through. Not all deal is created equal. Investors don't buy at the same margin on every property. I hear that all the time. They're like, hey, James, what will you buy at? Will you buy at a 15% return? It depends on what the deal is. The more work it needs, the more you need to protect yourself and you need a bigger margin. So like in this house right now that we just wholesaled off, we made $70,000 on this deal. That is a huge fee. We got a good price. But the investor has a huge upside on it. They have $120,000 to $130,000 in potential profit with a very conservative underwriting schedule on it. So what that means is we got paid well, but the investor's also getting paid well. You know, and the reason they needed so much margin in this deal, because it's a huge fixer. There's a lot of unknowns, right? We have mold throughout this property. We have water leaks springing up everywhere. We have squatters that have been breaking into this property and vandalizing, stripping out the wiring. The more unknowns, the better that you need to make your deal. So when you're looking at your deal, getting it ready to dispo, understand what your buyer's flavor for risk is, but also what returns they expect. So I want to spend a little time about the underwriting that we just touched on. One of the biggest things that we're pivoting right now is how we're looking at deals. So in 2008, the market had just crashed. A majority of people out there got rocked in the housing community, and no one had a good impression on real estate. They had a bad flavor on it. No one really wanted to buy it. So what we had to do was perfect the pro forma in our underwriting to where we mitigated risk to where people didn't have objections in every deal. We tried to think through all the objections before they even came our way. So what we've done to adjust our underwriting from going from a buyer's or seller's market to a buyer's market is we're adding in more contingencies and being very, very tight on how we look at things. So as we're looking at properties, we're using comps in a very tight radius. We're not going to outside neighborhoods. We want the same schools, same crime rates, same demographics looking at buying that deal. In addition to, we're using only recent fresh data. 30 to 60 days old, actives and pending. That tells us where the market is currently at, not where it was at. No one cares where it was. They want to know where it's going forward at that time. In addition to, we're looking at what values we're putting on things. If Jerome Powell comes up and says he's going to raise interest rates another point by the end of the year, we might want to be on the lower end or conservative value of whatever we're looking at. And if we really want to be conservative, we can build in a depreciation into our value rather than looking at what it's valued at today. All these things help investors feel better. They help them understand the deal. So as a wholesaler, you have to understand what you're actually selling. You need to take into considerations weird footprints and weird negative impacts and increase the margin. Like in this house that we just wholesaled here, we were able to make a big fee on this deal. The reason we were able to make a big fee on it is we were conservative on our underwriting and we could really explain to that investor where we came up with that value. This home has weird layout. It's a really cool Northwest Contemporary, but we had a 1-bedroom, 1-bath on the top floor, the in-suite, and then we had 2 bedrooms, 1 bath in the basement, and no bedrooms on the main floor. That is not family friendly. As wholesalers, we understood that. We understood that in this local market, that is going to be a buyer's deterrent, and we built that into our value. We had a high sale at $760,000 to $770,000. Right down the street, it just closed 2 weeks ago, so it's a very good data point. Same square footage, same everything. But it had 4 bedrooms up, 2-bath up, which was way more family friendly. So we discounted 10% off this property to ensure that it would move quicker. In addition to, we understood what we were doing. So when we brought our client through here and walked them through the plan, we could tell them how we already made that adjustment. We could show them the as is the current value and where we came down on it, because they understood how we were evaluating it and made them pull the trigger, and they gave us a cashier's check right there on the spot. And lastly, one of the major things we had to do to pivot for 2023 in wholesaling was how we marketed for sellers, but also for investors at that point. So sellers were really hard to get a hold of for the past 2 years. We had to spend more money on online leads, cold calling in-house, sending direct mail. These are expensive marketing channels just to get that one really good deal, and we had to keep very narrow targets. But over time, and as we switch into a buyer's market, guess what? Those seller leads are starting to increase. Right now, we have over 70 leads in the queue that we need to follow up with. People are reaching out. They want to sell their property. So what we had to do is switch how we spent our marketing dollars and who and how we were going to directly contact them. So things like mailing, door knocking, buying leads online, those can be expensive and very time intensive. They are still good ways to market for a deal. We have just shrunk down our buy box for those type of leads to where it's really just a product that's in high demand, or a target seller that is actually really hard to reach with a high probability of selling. In the meantime, we actually turned on our more affordable marketing, which is our call room. We use a company called Easy Button Leads. They can reach thousands of homeowners for us for a fraction of the cost. This allows us to contact massive amounts of sellers, because as we go into a recession, we don't know what's in a seller's brain. Our last few deals we bought would have showed up on no title search list for us. If we caught a person at the right time that was going through an issue, they may have just lost a job and they just want to dump the house off. They want it gone at that point. They need to move out of state. They don't want to deal with it. That's a seller that's not going to pop up on a poor condition list or even a foreclosure list. And so what it's done is it's given us additional deal flow. We used to not get very much seller response that way because everyone just wanted optimum pricing. So look at how you're spending your marketing dollars. Spend your high dollars and your high energy on a segmented tight list. Use your more affordable marketing for the masses. The next thing that we've had to pivot was, how do we market for investors? Because as you go into a buyer market, guess what? The seller's not hard to find, the buyer is. So you need to work with people that are actual buyers, not just people that want to look at a deal or that want the thing for free, that people will buy on today's margins. So ways that we're finding more investors is, A, we're just showing people what we're doing. We are actually using social media, online platforms to show that we're actually buying. Investors like buying from investors that are doing the hard work too, because we understand their pain. We know what they're going through in these projects, the change orders, the city issues. We can build their issues into our Forma. But the other way that you can reach out if you're not an active investor is you can look at the most recent buyers. Work with your title company. Who's closing in cash in the last 90 days? Who's closing in LLCs? Go to auctions, foreclosure auctions. Who's down there bidding? Those are guys that are buying in the now, not buying down the road. They're not going to spend their time to go to the auction just to wait around. In addition to, driving for dollars doesn't always mean you're driving for sellers. If I'm out driving a job site and I see a bunch of people there, I might stop by and talk to them and go, hey, what are you looking for? Are you still buying? Or are they just a homeowner renovating the home? If you find someone that had just started demoing a house, that's your buyer right now. They are okay working with the risk. So really look at who's actually working now. These old email lists of people that bought in the last 24 months. Remember what I said, 70% of the investors, at least in our local market, have kind of froze up and aren't buying. That means my lead list is 70% dead. I have to rebuild that and start building those relationships. But as you find these investors, don't just call them and say, hey, do you want a deal? Find out, take them to lunch, take them to coffee, and have an in-depth conversation with them so you can really understand what they want to buy. Wholesaling has been around through all different types of market cycles. Recently, I've heard a lot of guys saying, hey, I can't get rid of my deal. No one wants to buy anything. Then you need to buy a better deal. So you got to look at what you're doing, evaluate how you're looking at properties, get to know your investor clients, and go source what they want. If you don't have a big buyer's bench, use those buyers, find out exactly what you want, and then go target it for them. You will rack transactions. But make sure you're not staying behind the trends. If you're a wholesaler that's living in last year's numbers, your career is probably going away. You need to stay into what is going in now. So thanks for tuning in to BiggerPockets. If you liked this video on how to pivot wholesaling 2023, make sure you like and subscribe below. And for more wholesaling tips or investing tips in general, check us out on Instagram at jdaneflips or on YouTube at Project RE. And for more education, go to jamesdaner.com for free education on how to get more deals done.